In what may be a turning point in Africa's changing political climate, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa was said to have been spotted crying in a behind-closed-doors meeting at the African Union Summit. The tearful moment came in response to an unprecedented and blistering threat from Burkina Faso's transitional president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a rising star of Africa's new generation of unapologetic anti-imperialist leaders. The charged encounter has ignited fierce controversy throughout the continent, evoking both admiration and outrage among Africa's political leaders and street activists. It has put a harsh light on the deepening ideological and generational rift between the continent's elderly liberation leaders and the rising generation of revolutionary youth calling for a new radical direction. The incident occurred at a closely watched EU session focused on the consolidation of Pan-African unity and asserting the continent's sovereignty in a multipolar world order. With the talks shifting to economic dependence, democratic retrogression, and the ongoing deployment of Western military forces on African territory, it was evident that a confrontation was on the horizon. And then, in a voice that pierced the diplomatic niceties, Captain Traoré spoke up. In a firebrand speech marked by determination in his words and passion in his tone, the 36-year-old leader delivered a no-holds-barred condemnation of what he painted as the betrayal of revolutionary ideals by the continent's self-proclaimed elder statesman. Although he did not mention names at the outset, his aggressive comments left little room for doubt that he was targeting individuals like President Ramaphosa. Mr. President Traoré declared, addressing Ramaphosa directly, the ANC was once a beacon of Africa's resistance and hope. But now South Africa sends abroad not freedom but silence. You were supposed to take up the mantle of Mandela and Bo. And yet you have become guardians of Western interests. Africa does not require managers for the West. Africa needs liberators. Gasps could be heard throughout the hall. The room became silent, charged with tension. Some delegates averted their eyes while others glanced back at each other in disbelief. The gravity of Dora's words lingered like a storm cloud over the summit. For an instant, the AU meeting, usually the domain of scripted orations and diplomatic prudence, was transformed into the backdrop for a generational and ideological showdown. Witnesses close to the South African delegation later said President Ramaphosa was openly moved, taken aback not by belligerent words but by the naked reality of the moment. As Traoré's criticism resonated through the room, Ramaphosa reportedly lowered his eyes, pulled a handkerchief from the pocket of his jacket, and silently blotted tears welling up in his eyes. It was a short wordless moment, but one that soon went viral through off-the-record accounts, causing widespread comment across the continent. For many, it was a moment of sharp awakeness. Ramaphosa, once held as a leading figure in the anti-apartheid movement and the mastermind of South Africa's non-violent democratic transition, now found himself accused of presiding over a country beset by political sclerosis, accelerating inequality, and increasing disillusionment with the promises of emancipation. Captain Traoré, on the other hand, has become a face of the restless young people on the continent, a generation that has been betrayed by the glacial pace of democratization and infuriated by unabated foreign meddling in African affairs. Under his leadership since taking power in 2022 through a military-backed transition sustained by street protests, Traoré has pushed French soldiers out of Burkina Faso, made steps towards nationalizing strategic mineral assets, and positioned his nation ever more close to revolutionary regimes across the Sahel. Though some critics charge him with authoritarianism and demagoguery, his fans regard him as a much-needed corrective to decades of post-independence complacency and elite capture. His unflinching position and bold language have charged younger Africans who view him as a leader without fear of speaking what many secretly think. Traoré is the voice of the disillusioned, declared Professor Amin Diop, a political analyst at the University of Dar es Salaam. He may not be as polished as diplomats, but he conveys the anger and sense of urgency that many Africans and particularly the youth have toward Pan-Africanist leaders who make deals with exploiters. For generations, the African National Congress, ANC, has been the moral compass of African liberation. Through its history, which was forged by the likes of Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, and Steve Bow, it inspired generations on the continent. But now, to many, the ANC is a shadow of what it once was, marred by internal strife, corruption allegations, and loss of political imagination. President Ramaphosa took office in 2018 as a reformer, touting his ability to clean up the ANC, rekindle the South African economy, and restore public confidence in government institutions. But years on, the optimism that initially surrounded him has waned. Widespread joblessness, economic inequality, power blackouts, and persisting corruption have chipped away at public trust. His critics say he is too risk-averse, too consensus-oriented, and too beholden to powerful political interests. This dichotomy between Ramaphosa's measured diplomacy and Traoré's impassioned militancy has become symbolic of a larger question for Africa. What is the style of leadership the continent requires for the 21st century? On the line is not merely policy but vision. Will African countries continue to dance between old colonial powers and new great powers such as China and Russia? Or will they at last construct an authentically independent trajectory economically, politically, and culturally? The fallout from the AU summit showdown has been rapid and ferocious. African media and social media exploded with opinion. Traoré's fans declared him a truth-teller. Hashtags such as #AfricaRising and #NomariPuppet started trending, especially on social media among young West and Central Africans. Back in South Africa, however, voices on all sides demanded that the ANC embark on a proper process of introspection and rejuvenation. Veteran reporter Thabo Macon penned in the Sunday Tribune, "What occurred at the AU was not an embarrassment for Ramaphosa alone. It was a symbolic breakdown of the ANC's untouchable myth. The struggle credentials which previously conferred immunity on the party are no longer sufficient. The people want results. They want courage." Others took a guarded approach. A South African presidency statement referred to the summit as productive and urged unity in diversity among Africa's leaders, but didn't mention the confrontation explicitly. But close observers say the ANC's top leadership is shaken and that Ramaphosa has privately accepted the validity of some of Traoré's criticisms. Whether this moment produces deep change, only time will tell. But one thing is certain, Africa is moving into a new era of politics. One not defined by the demons of history, but by the demands of the here and now and the aspirations of a new generation. As the dust clears from the AU summit, there is one picture that stays in the minds of most, a veteran president wiping away tears from his eyes as a young rebel dares to utter the truth.